The most common question I get from my clients is, how do I know I'm in labor? In this video, I will break down the difference between Braxton Hicks, prodromal labor, and early labor, which early labor means it's go time. If you're new here, hi, I'm Kelly, and in this channel, I teach you all about how to have an unmedicated hospital birth and how to feel empowered and ready for your birth. Let's get going. Braxton Hicks. Braxton Hicks are also called warm-up contractions, and these typically feel like a tightening on the surface of your stomach. And so much like a little cramp that you might get like in your calf or even like a little eye twitch or something, this is more of a surface level tightening of your uterus. It's common to experience Braxton Hicks often during the third trimester. Think of them as a warm-up. They are uncomfortable and a little cringy, but most would not describe them as painful. Not everybody feels Braxton Hicks, and it's not good or bad if you do. It just is what it is. Prodromal labor. This can be defined as start and stop labor. Prodromal labor might involve several minutes, if not even up to hours, of contractions. Now, these contractions are real. They're typically not super intense, but they might have a little bit of a pattern, and they might go on and on for several minutes, if not hours. This is one of the areas where I see, especially first-time pregnant people, get a little confused. Because oftentimes we hear if you can count your contractions, if they follow a pattern and don't stop after an hour, it's time to go to the hospital. Well, this isn't always the case. What I tell my clients is that if they're starting to experience contractions that fall into some pattern or maybe could be timeable, your first step is to do everything you can to try to make those contractions go away. There are three main ways I advise my clients to make contractions go away. 1, hydrate. Ideally, some sort of drink with electrolytes. My favorite is an unsweetened coconut water. 2, eat a small protein-based snack. 3, lay down on your left side and rest. If laying down doesn't quite feel possible, perhaps jump into the shower or draw yourself a bath, something where you're in more of a relaxed state. Doing these 3 things should slow down the frequency of contractions if you are in prodromal labor. You might still be experiencing contractions, but if they're not getting any closer together and not getting more severe with rest, hydration, and nourishment, then it's likely to be prodromal labor. Eventually, prodromal labor stops altogether and passes. Early labor. This is true labor that cannot be stopped no matter what you do, no matter how much hydration, how much rest. Contractions get closer together and or more intense. So if you begin to have contractions and you try the 3 tricks that I taught you, and contractions are not slowing down or going away and are just getting more and more intense, it's very likely that you are in early labor. Early labor is defined as anything before 6 centimeters dilated. And so the purpose of early labor is to dilate your cervix to 6 centimeters. If you're a low-risk pregnancy, it's advisable to stay at home or not yet quite call your medical team or go to the birth center until you are well into, if not through, early labor. You might be wondering, why do I have to wait at home in early labor for so long? Well, if your goal is to have an unmedicated hospital birth, the longer you can labor at home, the less likely there's time and reason to introduce or offer any medical interventions. And an intervention doesn't have to just mean an epidural. It's things like putting a saline heplock into your hand and connecting you to an IV, or wrapping your belly with a fetal monitor, or restricting your ability to eat and drink. All of these interventions can interrupt physiologic labor. It's really common for people to get to the hospital too early and then labor to slow down. And let's face it, the hospital is way less comfortable than your own house. Like this video if you agree that you do not want to get to the hospital too early. So of course, check with your medical provider, but there shouldn't be any reason why you can't labor at home throughout early labor and go to the hospital once you're ready to hit that active labor part. You'll know you're in active labor when you can no longer talk or move or really even think during a contraction. The intensity of active labor contractions is far different than the early labor ones, which are exhausting, but not necessarily something that you can't handle, mostly on your own. If you want to know more tips about how to have an unmedicated hospital birth, I made an excellent video that shares with you my top 3 tips for having an unmedicated hospital birth. You can click it right here. I want to give you a quick note if you are a second-time parent. If this is going to be your second time giving birth, I want to refer back to prodromal labor. Now, it's super common for second-time birthers to experience prodromal labor. This can be really confusing for those who maybe had an induction for their first pregnancy and haven't had the experience of going into spontaneous labor. It can also be confusing for those whose first pregnancy maybe was really long and it took a really long time to get dilated past a 5. Second-time parents can typically expect to experience some version of prodromal labor. And remember, prodromal labor, start and stop labor, can last for hours, days, or even weeks leading up to true early labor. On the other side of the coin, if you experience several rounds of prodromal labor across many days or weeks, it can often mean that once you hit true labor, that things can go really fast. So when we talk about Braxton Hicks, prodromal labor, and early labor, I want to offer you a mindset shift that might be helpful. All of these forms of contractions are productive. Braxton Hicks are warming up and strengthening your uterus. Prodromal labor is working on making early change to your cervix. And so even if prodromal labor isn't leading to dilation, it could be doing things like help to soften your cervix or shorten your cervix or change the position of your cervix or change the position and station of your baby. It can be exhausting if you have prodromal labor on and off for days or even weeks, but try to remember that it is productive. In order for your cervix to dilate, it has to first become ripe, which often means softening. I made a video all about my 5 natural methods for softening your cervix and getting your body ready for labor. These methods can begin as soon as 37 weeks for a low-risk pregnancy. Binge watch my series, Better Hospital Birth, where I talk to you all about how to have an unmedicated hospital birth and how to avoid induction unless absolutely medically necessary. You can end this video binge by watching my beautiful birth story, which took place in a hospital and was super positive.